What's up, YouTube? I want to make a follow-up video to my earlier video about racism and cognitive dissonance. The other day, I had my son at my girlfriend's mother's house, and they live in a community where there's a lot of colored people, black kids, brown kids, Hispanic kids, and under normal circumstances, they all get along. But my son came forward and told me that he was being picked on for being white. And he was telling me that not only were several of the kids that he was playing with were picking on him for being white, but he said that the guy that sells ice cream and apparently some older gentleman that runs a little shop out of a truck, it looks like an ice cream truck, was asking one of his friends why he hangs out with a white kid. Okay. The point of this video that I want to make is to highlight the basic fact that seems to evade several people who say that only whites can be racist, or that non-whites can't be racist. Well, that's simply not true. And what I want to do is I want to promote the idea of tolerance on a universal level. We have to get past this notion that only white kids need to be brought up to learn that racism is wrong, while we leave our black and brown brothers and everybody else out of that equation, and we don't teach them that tolerance is acceptable and that racism and bigotry is okay. That's not acceptable. Clearly, when kids are saying that, yes, kids do say stupid things, and I think that reflects poorly on the parents. However, for older adults to be saying racist things, that's what happens when you don't check it at a young age. Okay. Before I get into this video, I want to just highlight something. I've been hearing a lot of this stuff, and let's just go with calling them radical leftists, right? They've been outed as radical leftists. Now, not all leftists agree. And maybe I'll make another video about this. Not all right-wingers agree. In fact, I don't really like to use right-wing and left-wing too much, except for the fact that people use, for ease of use, they say things like left-wing and right-wing, but really it's more complicated than that. For instance, anarchists and communists are called left-wing, but is that really even the same thing? I mean, they're literally universes apart. Anarchists are get rid of all government. Communists are essentially for a totalitarian government. And they might not tell you otherwise, but literally that's what they're for. But again, this isn't a video that I'm trying to talk about politics. It's about race and racism. And I want to highlight again that it's possible for people who aren't white to be racist. Not only to white people, but to themselves, to each other. And then I also want to highlight another aspect of racism, internalized racism. So that might be an Asian American using stereotypes against his own. It might be a black person being racist against their own, or a white person being racist against their own. And I do hear that. I hear examples of all of those things. So I was looking online because I was asking, okay, here's the question I was asking. Check it out. I was looking up, what is the difference between racism and bigotry? Okay? What is the difference? So I found this. It was from a blog. I'll have to find out the name of the lady who wrote it. Debbie something. I'll look it up. Bigotry is stronger than prejudice. It's more severe mindset and often accompanied by discriminatory behavior. It's arrogant and mean-spirited, but it requires neither systems nor power to engage in. Racism is a system that allows the racial group that's already in power to retain power. Since arriving on U.S. soil, white people have used their power to create preferential access to survival rights and to resources like housing, education, jobs, voting, citizenship, food, health, legal protection, etc. for white people, while simultaneously impeding people of color's access to these same rights and resources. She goes on to say, basically, she's not the only one who says it, that racism only exists with white folk. And then argues that racism and institutional racism are essentially the same thing. Okay. Well, how can that be? Because if racism literally is institutional racism, why did you even use the word institutional? Why don't you just say racism? If you really honestly believe that, you're adding a word in front of racism, which describes it as institutional, which implies that there's uninstitutional racism. Okay? Not all racism needs to come from the state. It doesn't need to come from within institutions and within government or within an industry. You know, if a guy in a trailer park who has no money, no power, is white and he's racist, he doesn't wield any power. That's not institutional racism. That's just racism. But this gets into a deeper question, and that is, if only whites can be racist and all racism is institutional, well then how do you account for the fact that in other countries there is racism by the dominant party, by the dominant group against minorities? And I'm talking about in countries in Asia and in Africa and elsewhere where there's no white people in the equation. So for instance, in a place like Burma, we have ethnic genocide against Muslim groups. And there's some pretty graphic stuff online you can find out. Or in China, where they're throwing Muslims into concentration camps, an entire ethnic group of people. It's like an ethnic religious discrimination. And they're trying to re-educate them. What about Darfur in the Sudan? What about all that Arab anti-black racism and genocide and killing people? Mass slaughters. And the same thing can be looked at in a place like Libya, where they actually have Arabs with open slave markets, where they're like decapitating and castrating and hanging people and selling slaves. Like, this is like something from centuries ago we had heard about, slavery in America. Well, that kind of stuff still goes on. And again, no whites in the equation. Arabs, blacks, Chinese, Rohingya Muslims, all these different groups. And there's state-sponsored genocides and discrimination. Okay. So this is a good thing to raise awareness, because look, people can talk all they want and they could try to twist the English language and they could try to excuse it and justify it all they want, but it's really simple. You know, we don't have to twist words here. This isn't some Orwellian double speak. Okay? The thing is this. If you're trying to say that only one race can be racist, and then you look up the definition of racism, it literally says, racism is the belief in the hierarchy of races, that some are superior and others are inferior, that some are capable of doing certain things that others are not. So if you're going to say that one race is only capable of racism, you're literally by definition a racist, because what you're saying is that only one race can do something that other races cannot. Now that's racist. So if you're going to fight racism and be an anti-racist, but then you're actually being a racist, not only are you being a racist and contributing to the problem and antagonizing a group of people, which in turn might turn some of them racist because they'll get sick and tired of being, well, people are reactionary by nature, but almost worse, and I would actually argue this is worse, you're actually excusing other groups being racist and being bigoted. And that's unacceptable. You can't just slide that stuff under the rug and try to act like it's not there. Anyhow, I just want to play some stuff. I mean, this is pretty graphic. Okay. So let's go to my YouTube. Okay, so gangland. This is a perfect example. And the street gangs. Okay, there's a lot of racism. Not all violence is race-based, but there's a lot of racism in street gangs. So, here's a perfect example. And I'm just going to play this for you. Watch. This is about the Florencia gang. He says he hated black people. This is a Salvadorian. So this gangland episode is talking about the Florencia gang in Los Angeles, how they're literally were like on the hunt for black people to kill. Do you guys remember the MAGA hat kids? The ones that were in the news, and they were like Catholic Covington kids, and they kind of got shouted down for a little while, and then the news media kind of came out and apologized, and there was lawsuits over this. It came out that a group called the Black Israelites were there and were antagonizing them and being extremely racist and homophobic. But that group was actually there at a Native American rally, and they were antagonizing the Native Americans and saying that because their religious beliefs, they deserved genocide. And then they started being racist against whites, but then they also started being racist against blacks who had a problem with their hate speech and started calling them Sambos. Like, watch. It's a long video. It's 28 minutes. I'm obviously not going to play the whole thing, but this is a perfect example.
Listen, and that's the reason why the white man got his foot in your ass. That's right. And that's the reason why you talk like that. Because listen, you a $5 Indian. You go over there, you $5 Indian. You ain't no Tyler Perry. You are the devil. You are fake. You are fake now $5 Indian. That's right. Go that way. You're not that's right. Stop trying to. You always want to take our culture. That's right. Just like the white man. That's he wants to be the Egyptian.
So look, again, the Israelites, it's kind of an extremist group. Yeah, but they're not the only black group that does this kind of thing. There's the Nation of Islam. There is that kind of stuff going on, but this is a far more extreme group. And you might say, well, they're just crazy people on the street talking about it. And obviously a lot of blacks, they don't like this. They don't agree with it. And understandably so. It's hate speech. But we have to take it seriously because there was in New Jersey 3 Jews that were murdered by people affiliated with this group. So is that not a problem? I mean, is this not something we need to address? I've heard a lot of racism back and forth between Mexicans and Salvadorians. And there's a lot of stuff online about that. And then, again, there's other groups, Jews and Muslims. And then the Black Israelites versus the Muslims. Like, there's a lot of intergroup fighting and violence. And it's especially when it spills over into gang warfare, well, it's just like with the Florencia gang. And then lastly, I want to just talk about this other thing. So there's like a problem here with comedians. I was looking into this in the Asian American community where they are talking about, check it out. They're talking about Asian comedians, and this one guy was talking about Ken Jeong. He says, I don't know what Ken Jeong's deal is. My best guess is he's still on the stage. I was in high school, trying to take control of the pain he faced growing up in a racist U.S. by making his own racist Asian jokes. It's sad to see, and I hope he eventually realizes the harm he's causing, because him making the kind of racist Asian jokes he does has the impact of inviting others, including non-Asian people, to perpetuate the ideas. There was another, and I was watching it the other day on Reddit. There was a woman, Asian American woman, and she was making racist jokes about Asian men and saying that basically they're not even worth dating because they're so pathetic. That's bullshit. They're not all geeky nerds. I've seen plenty of Asian guys that are like smart, handsome, athletic. They're well-dressed, well-mannered, intelligent people. Like, I can't understand why like any girl, especially like a Asian girl, wouldn't want to date them. I mean, that's just foolishness. But again, there's a lot of self-hate out there. There was a video on Dr. Phil where this black girl hated her own people so much that she would follow the Ku Klux Klan. Like, come on, that's retarded. Okay, and then another thing. Okay, so, and this goes back to that point about, well, only whites can be racist and institutional racism. What happens if it's an anti-white racist who's white and he's actually in an institution? There was a right here, Drexel University. They had a fire, and this isn't the only guy. I've seen other cases like this, but it said. Drexel University professor George Maher, I don't know if I'm saying that right, Maher, tweeted that all he wanted for Christmas was white genocide. This was a white guy tweeting his own hate for his own people in a university. So this is literal institutional racism, and the victim on the receiving end are white. One of my Facebook friends posted that little said it was mocking people that say I was bullied for being white. And then it says, no, you were bullied because you wore vampire teeth to school and sat on the floor in the middle of the hallway in a trench coat growling at people during lunch hour. Shut up. Well, that's funny, but the problem is I also was bullied. I don't really talk about it, but I was bullied. My sister was bullied. My son is being picked on, or at least he was. But what about this story about this boy named Aaron Dugmore, 9 years old, found hanging in his Birmingham home by his mother, believed to be Britain's second youngest suicide caused by bullying? Well, he was bullied for being white. This kid literally was bullied by racist people who hated him, and he ended up committing suicide at the age of 9 years old. Now, obviously, he's not the first to commit suicide by bullying. There's a lot of bullying, a lot of suicides, and a lot of it is racist, although maybe not all of it is racist, but a lot of it is. And there's a lot of blacks who also killed themselves because of racist bullying. But in this case, it was actually a white student who killed himself at the age of 9. So, look, we need to do this. We need to teach universal tolerance, okay? We need to understand that white people aren't the only racists, and not all racists are white people. And that's just a fact. We could play with words and try to stretch it and make it sound like, well, you know, but but the reality is different. Okay? The facts don't add up to these radicals who want to write poems online. Look, even if you want to make those arguments, the absolute best case scenario, and I don't even agree with them, the best case scenario is that you can only make that argument within the bounds of the United States. Because once you leave the country, those rules no longer apply. Because there's genocides elsewhere, and that has nothing to do with whites on either end. Okay? So that's the first thing I want to say. And then the second was teach, you know, look, a lot of parents are teaching white kids to not be racist, but our other cultures, our other races and ethnicities, are they teaching their kids also not to be racist and to tolerate others? It's a really good question, I think. I feel I have so much to say, but I'm gonna wrap up the video, and that's pretty much it. That's about what I wanted to say, honestly. And if I had other thoughts, you know, whatever, the minor at this point. The main point is we just need to teach universal tolerance. Teach your kids, and don't just say it's on one race or culture. That's not true. That's not true. Anyhow, I just wanted to rant, and I did talk to my son about that bullying and told him, look, it's just stupid kids. But again, if you catch it, call it out. Whether it's a white person being racist or it's somebody else being racist who's not white, call it out. We're all in this together. Okay? Cheers.